Good morning. Welcome back to AM Live. Mambo ya economy me cha during the break. I just want to remind you who I am with in studio this morning. Mark Buchachi, communication strategist, Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, Kennedy Ondiek, governance and political analyst, and Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate and political analyst. And during the break, as promised, I remembered what skipped my mind just before the break, informed by what Ishmael submitted last about one side seeking to silence the other. But the president did say the creation of the office of the leader of the opposition is about allowing the opposition space to politic and criticize the government from morning to evening. But we'll get into that because that has to do substantively with the topic of conversation. We have just about 12 minutes to wrap these papers up. Kennedy, your thoughts on I suppose both the Business Daily front page and the Taifa Leo.
There are so many issues that came in from different papers. But for me, I want to talk about only value of shares. I was trying to share with my friend here, Bichachi. And I am only going to differ with him a little about IMF, because when we are doing any policy document, we have to involve certain particular individuals. And these individuals cannot also run away from it because it is actually a product of a collective will of different groups. So for me, in terms of economic situation, yes, value of shares has gone too low to the extent that most of the shares have become worthless, and many companies are likely to lose in terms of NSE place. But I am actually very critical on sometimes you're supposed to have challenges so that we have successes in the future. The past regimes have allowed Kenyans to ride on lies of a lot of financial cushioning and so many subsidies which have not been of value to Kenyans, and instead has increased our debt level to the extent that we have a lot of challenges at the debt in the world market in terms of money issues. So we had to borrow a lot in order to take care of subsidies and cushionings which were not even supposed to be done. So I think the UDA government, the government we have of the day, is only trying to make right the wrongs that were committed by those who came in order to please Kenyans, to make them feel happy, yet they were not actually happy. I also want to talk about this being a long-term solution. You can be having short-term solutions as they were brought in the past subsidies, but I'm telling you that the most important thing is to have a long-term solution. So it's better to suffer and also know that while you're suffering, you're creating a better future for you and posterity. The most important thing, again, we have to agree with as a country, is that we cannot allow we cannot claim that when president proceeds to talk, he is talking, he's politicking. When he goes to launch projects, what do you expect him to do? He's only launching projects because he wants to do what he promised so that he can be correct according to his manifesto. So, and also, what do you want these politicians to talk about when they go to public fora? What do you want them to talk about? He's a politician. A politician must talk politics. And so what do you expect Rigiji, when the president has explained the agenda, what do you expect Rigiji to say? Because he cannot shut up while he's there. So all sides are willing to let each and every side shut up. When the ambassador of America the other day talked about Kenya's election having been done well, opposition asked them to shut up. It is only when statements don't augur well with what you want, you get iked and you tell somebody to shut up. I am going to tell you that in case the government really wants to make Kenyans happy, it has to allow Kenyans to suffer a little. And this we have to contain so that we don't run to subsidies to be happy while we'll not be smiling all the way as we want to.
All right. Arnold, your last word on the front page, Business Daily and Taifa Leo.
I'll start with Taifa Leo. They're talking about 2027. First of all, even as Taifa Leo tries to move us forward, we actually have to congratulate Taifa Leo. That team down there, I think, does very well. When you look at newspapers, sometimes you actually can see that art of journalists, proper writing craft that comes up with them. Their headlines are those, they even turn into memes very fast. You know, nowadays, memes are ways of actually knowing that you have arrived. That is how, when people feature you in a meme, you realize you can call your mom and say, Mom, I've made it. So Taifa Leo is one of those products that are actually doing very well from this particular end. So let's start from this particular point. You cannot recite poetry to a man who's carrying a sword. And you cannot shake hands with a clenched fist. The opposition is politicking. They do not have a monopoly of politicking. If it's actually, let me use the word, trash talking other people, the opposition does not have that monopoly. You do not expect to push Rigiji, the president, and his people into a corner and expect them to come back to you So when it comes to politicking, I have seen a lot of exceptionalism coming from my friend Ishmael and Mark, my brother on the other side, about people politicking and the others. The opposition, for example, has refused to move from 2022. Taifa Leo is trying to move us to 2027. You know, that's why I'm actually saying we need to actually thank them. That they're trying to move us forward. Because we have got a group here that has actually stuck in 2022. They have not left that. And that then speaks, I'll go directly to the Business Daily. The BD is, you know, the problem with newspaper writing today is that you have got the problem that there is an information overload. So people easily forget. We are still in a politicking environment. We really have not really completely left 2022. And I have said that repeatedly on this particular set, that if you are to look at our economic graph since 1992, is that a year to an election, the economy dips down. And then it starts going up slowly, then peaks midway. And then because elections are unnecessary, I'm talking about a necessary evil or comma to the economic process, then again, as we a year to the next election, we go down. So what we are seeing here is the conflict, or is actually markets reacting to the political places we've been to. There were days where you looked back and even the whole world was worried that Kenya was actually going to break apart. We've really done well for ourselves. We actually also have to congratulate ourselves and not beat ourselves to pulp just because we have to do the beating. So if you look at how markets are reacting, it's not any different from how, because political stability is very, very important. We still have got people who are threatening and telling us that if talks fail, then we have got options and everything else. Why are we having dialogue if, for example, the end is predetermined? There's no need of us actually having a conversation if the end is already determined and it has actually is supposed to end. So why are we talking?
So you're agreeing with Kimani Ichung'wah?
We should actually have an open-ended thinking when we approach these particular talks. Okay. But also, let us look at the talks from a positive perspective.
All right, can I pause on the talks? Okay. Because I want us to wrap this up. The front page of the Standard, mystery of missing billionaire. The family of investor Jaswant Rai reported to police about his abduction, and all attempts to know his whereabouts were met with wall of silence. DCI grilled him last month. When I look at the Business Daily, just next page over from NSE listing drought, what ails Kenya's capital markets. They talk about the police saying, I think it's the next page over. Let me see. Shouldn't be too far now. Here we go. Police deny holding sugar billionaire Jaswant Singh Rai. And also on the front page of the Standard. Do you guys want to weigh in on this? Do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So 1 second. Mora again is also featured on the front page of the Standard there. Here we go. Look at that. Is this? No, this is Faith Kipyegon. I beg your pardon. Here, this is Faith Kipyegon. But look at that smile. Best in the world. 1,000, the 1,500 meters and 5,000 meters races. GOAT, pride of the nation, Faith Kipyegon is now the most decorated and the world's best athlete in 2023 by winning 2 gold medals at the World Athletics Championships earlier in the year. She broke 3 world records in the 1,500 meters, 5,000 meters, and a mile. Team Kenya in Budapest. Let me just say, congratulations. At least you give us something to celebrate. Also, the front page of the Standard spotlight on lands officials over fraud. Owners of an 18-acre land in the city want EACC to investigate lands ministry officials who facilitated fraudulent transfer of the property, leading to court battles. Let me see. This is not the Lavington one, I'm guessing. Yeah, this should not be the Lavington land that is in dispute. This is page what? Page 7. Give me a quick second. I am almost there. Just quickly flipping over to confirm. It's in Loresho. Okay, my 2 pages here stuck together. I'll take your word for it. Yeah, so your thoughts on this. I'll pull up the CCTV footage that was shared by Boniface Mwangi on Twitter. I'll start with you. I think we're back to you, Mark. Okay. Quickly, so that.
I think it's very unfair that we're living in a country where when people take a billionaire, it is suspected that the police could have done it. That already tells you how far we are slipping as a country. The police should not be an instrument of terrorizing people, especially for financial gains. Mr. Rai is one of the most qualified industrialists we have in this country. And if you are to ask me whether you want the person who successfully ran Kabra Sugar to take it over, or some politician's friend who just helped in shouting on top of caravans, who's more qualified to take it over, then it should not be politicians. And this is the biggest problem. We need to stop mixing our politics with business. And we know how competent our politicians are. Just look at the state of our roads.
All right. Kennedy?
Yeah, personally, I sympathize with the family, and I really think that as a country, we need to look more into safety of everyone, including billionaires and those who have no money. I really want to believe that as a country, and where we are coming from, dark days are gone, and I believe we are not supposed to be in darkness if any of such a thing happen. And I really might not want to make serious comments on it, because even the DCI doesn't seem to know where the person is. So I don't know who has him, and we cannot talk about who has him because we don't know, all of us. So I really plead with authorities who are responsible for looking after such individuals, or who are supposed to take care of safety of Kenyans. I really also want to make it that Kenyan security is also a serious challenge, and you find that it has been there in the past, but we are working, I think as a government is working so much towards ensuring that there is clarity of facts when it comes to issues of security of either individuals or any other kind of property in the country, because the government has a big duty to that extent.
Okay, for the record, I received an alert yesterday. Billionaire businessman just want Rai freed after Friday abduction in Nairobi, but details of his kidnappers remain unknown. Boniface Mwangi, who sounded the alarm on Twitter himself, posted 9 hours ago, just want Singh Rai has been released unharmed. See me wanging. Arnold.
You almost said unarmed. Okay. Don't worry, our roots are deep. So, be that as it may, I think this is a sad story, of course, running in here. If people of wealth and status like him can actually be abducted this way, then you actually also want to get worried for yourself, and then any other ordinary Kenyan who might not have people who will actually push. I think this is one of those things that really need Parliament coming up in a bipartisan approach. You realize, like Ababu Namwamba had a bipartisan roasting the other day, a very rare bipartisan roasting that happens. I hope that Parliament really takes up that going forward, so that then even the security agencies are actually put to task. You know, we cannot be in a place where people are captured and then released, captured. What is this social experiment that somebody is trying to do? We just don't need to have this going around. Also, they should also be forthcoming with information. I don't want to say so much about this because it's quite a sensitive issue, because it involves security of people, their freedoms. And in the past, we've not seen this end very well. We thank God that he's actually back home well. But there's a story here that we've really been skirting around and not talking about. I don't know whether it's Budapest or Budapest, wherever it is. But I think in Kiswahili, I would say Budapest sio ya mabuda. Our men have not really done very well. The girls have done quite well. We really are happy that when our boys went to bed and slept, at least our girls actually held firm their fort. We are happy with what Faith has done. Mora is also doing quite well. These are the things that actually keep reminding us that we are Kenyans, over and above the noises that are around here. We've got a very noisy democracy. This morning, if you look at this particular set and you hear part of our comments, you will actually think that we are a very angry nation. But not really. We are just passionate. And over and above, this is actually happening. So I think our girls have done well. The boys a little bit. We also need, when they come back, we will need to see a bipartisan roasting like the one we saw on the other side. So literally everybody, so that we see a balance in how these things are working out. Internationally, I think also this story, we also need to normalize talking about our neighbors or what is happening there. The crocodile won his second term. in Zimbabwe. That's the first thing I've seen, a ballot paper that does not have a name, but it has got a title already, you know, like you're called, on the ballot paper, you say President so-and-so, and then the others are just referred by name. So even if I'm making a choice, you look at that, that listing and you're like, that's a ballot paper and it already is listed that way. So be that as it may, I think there's so much to look at newspapers. It's also important to encourage people to be buying newspapers. Our language out here is now full of memes and stuff and everything else. Newspapers are still a very good source of language. Buy them. There's a lot of knowledge. You see a lot of ignorant arguments on social media, yet it's outside there on a newspaper. If you can't buy a hard copy, please just subscribe for 20 shillings.
Thank you. E-paper.nation.
As in those things, you hear guys arguing, and it's not just, it's actually already in a newspaper, and somebody's actually spinning a weave there, and you're also looking very funny commenting there. When it exists, 20 shillings, 10 shillings, you get subscription. Let us read newspapers. This is not going out of fashion. Social media is a fad. Okay. It's here, but then this is still the old way of actually getting your information and even sharpening your skills.
Thank you very much. Leo umetuzia gazeti. Extra mandazi.
Now, Olive, in society, there is always pseudo behavior. There are people who know what is going on, and then they actually create their own parallel conduct. I'm talking about criminals. Criminals exist everywhere, from church to police force. And this case of Jaswant Singh is such a special one. I had a different comment until you said that he had already come back home. I was actually going to tell you that if police wanted to produce Jaswant Singh, dead or alive, it will take minutes. Kenyan police force is an extremely well-trained team. In fact, special police officers go to train outside the country. There is hardly any intelligence that the National Police Service does not have about you, even the four of us here. So I am happy they came back home. Now I have to dwell on criminals. Let me tell you how criminals operate. I mean, it could be so easy for criminals to actually kidnap Jaswant Singh. Whether collaborating with a bad orange in the police force or not, it is very easy for criminals to block our cars on the road and pretend to be police officers and take us somewhere, they want some money, and then later they release us. This happens all the time. The issue here, which Arnold actually mentioned, which is important, is how cohesive, how coordinated, how unified is the national police force so that they can actually stop criminals from doing anything. I am never worried if a police officer kidnaps me, quote unquote. I mean, if he arrests me and cuffs me and takes me to some police station. But I would be so worried if a criminal, using the police channels, understanding how police operates, kidnaps me, because for that matter, if he's scared, within a minute, I would be gone. So we should look at these issues, not necessarily on how to condemn the police, but how coordinated and unified are they to actually stop criminals from interfering with the normal running of the police service and keeping our security.
Don't be too sure about the police. Remember the lawyer, the taxi driver, you know, and what happened. Yeah. So, okay. So, situingie mambo ya topic of conversation because, okay, so the two headlines I'll look at next touch on that. So we might as well, right? Star tells us Ruto sets ground for Raila's Plum Office. Proposed law allocates opposition chief's office 5% of political parties' fund. President believes strong watchdog will enhance oversight of the executive. But also just quickly looking at what else is on the front page of the Star, mountains of filth choke river as climate summit set for city, and that is that image there. Sakaja's Dishi na county feeding program to be rolled out in phases. Reforms police uniform committee seeks opinion ahead of planned adoption of new set. What was it called? What did Rigiji call the blue uniform? Mothers Union or something like that. My achievements, Governor Waiguru opens up on her scorecard and tenure as COG chairperson. And at the very top here, without a trace, House Sugar Baron Jaswant Singh Rai was abducted. Front page of the People Daily. On a light note, I was going to ask whether national blackouts should be added into the national agenda. How outage hit farms' families. Counting losses, tales of agony after businesses, hospitals, malls, and homes suffer from 15-hour weekend power blackout. What you talk about, the crocodile, those are the images they have on their front pages. Which way Zimbabwe after polls? President Emerson Mnangagwa was at the weekend declared winner of a tightly contested presidential race, securing his second and final term. Even as opposition candidate Nelson Chamisa rejected the results, and observers raised questions about the integrity of the elections. According to the BBC, police arrested 11 election observers, accusing them of attempting to interfere with the voting. Meanwhile, in another election in Gabon, the government cut off internet, citing fears of incitement to violence, as President Ali Bongo seeks a third term to extend his family's 56-year rule in the Central Africa nation. So mambo ya uchaguzi nakaa, it's plaguing several countries, not just Kenya. And this is what we are asking this morning. Here we go. Speaking at odds, querulous rants, threat to dialogue, gamesmanship. And Mark, the reason I asked this question is, this week, tomorrow, Senate will hold a special sitting to legitimize the National Dialogue Committee, give it legal legs, or so we've been told. And then on Wednesday, they're scheduled to sign an agreement on the agenda and the timelines. So, you know, is this, as Kimani Ichung'wah, okay, so listening, this is happening on the backdrop of a lot of political statements and ultimatums on both sides. What do you make of the current political environment?
The fact is, if you read between the lines, and then you read some of the lines that even the president himself has said, you realize that these talks are merely a formality. The decisions have been made. By that I mean the office of the leader of opposition will be created, and the office of prime minister will be created. How do I know this? That number one, it has been stated in Kimani Ichung'wah's statement. It was stated in a letter to Parliament by the President himself, and it is the only logical end to these particular talks. So therefore, when we hear the politicians trading barbs and throwing words at each other, we must be very clear that it is only politics they are playing. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm abusing the word politics. It is politricks they are playing, and those tricks are simply to bamboozle us and also to satisfy those people who they feel supported them because they hated the other side. That's both sides of Azimio and UDA, because none of them want to come out of these particular talks looking like friends. They must agree but look like enemies. That's really what is going on. It is when people are cheating and then they pretend in public that they don't know each other and they hate each other. That's what is going on. UDA and Azimio is in bed. If you doubt me, you tell me which Raila Odinga will refuse 5% of the political party's fund, and you tell me which William Ruto would not want for there to be quiet from Azimio and a smooth run of office. So this is already done. The other things they will say about insulting each other, I will tell you, like I said before, both sides should shut up, because it gives us no political benefit at all to hear a president, a former prime minister, a deputy president trading insults. It does not help our economy, does not change the price of bread, and other than stressing us, it does not do anything good for this country. So Kenyans, relax. The deal has been signed, and the fact that both the majority and minority want to legitimize this process as they insult each other, then you should know that they make for strange bedfellows, but bedfellows they are.
You have Arnold sitting up straight. Kennedy, in Western, we saw Kimani Ichung'wah say, kuna bishop mahali hapo aliongea, and they said, ikitu ishaenda, you know, so ikitu isha.
Yeah, I think this thing it was finished even before it started, since the main intention which Kenyans thought was in that particular talk is actually coming out not to be the reality in the talk, because actually Kenyans who went on the streets thought that their intentions of having the cost of living reduced would be on top of the agenda. And the moment it failed to be on top of the agenda, I believe it ended even before it started. But I also want to make a comment in this manner. What was actually supposed to be on the talks? At the same time, what was the interest? Because you realize that the opposition says that if the talks fail, they have options. What was actually supposed to be achieved by the opposition? And this one brings me to my overall comment that opposition do not know what they want. And I think it goes back to Atuoli's statement during the Labor Day, that these people who are bickering and making noise are simply those who are jobless. And maybe there's need to just give them a little job, and they would be busy doing that job instead of being busy looking at you doing yours. Because the president has seen the weakness that when we were launching BBI, he said, have you taken care of the situation of winner takes it all? And I'm telling you, the situation of winner takes it all, which was not settled, is the reason why there is a lot of joblessness and there is a lot of noise. And that is the plain truth. When we don't have people who are busy, they get busy dealing with you. And that is why the opposition, it was a serious oversight in our constitution making process to remove this position of official opposition leader in parliament. Because it leaves the official opposition leader or the opposition leader with only option of going to the funerals, addressing issues in matangas and the rest. He has no proper channel through which he can hear his views. He has to go to a roost somewhere, he has to go to a birthday party of somebody, he has to go somewhere for him to air his views. And I can tell you for a fact, if he can have that particular platform in the National Assembly or in Parliament in overall, in general, he can air those views there. I might also look at the issue of when you look at the state itself and the constitution how it is structured, we are supposed to have roles of particular individuals. We cannot have a person running for an election, getting almost 6 million votes, and then fails to have an opportunity to speak. Every day he wants to speak something. He has only to go on Facebook or Twitter. It is only fair that the leader of opposition be taken back to parliament. He can whip, he can help his whip his members in parliament and they consult inside parliament. It is necessary to have this position back.
All right. Arnold, your thoughts?
I'll not start with the leader of opposition. You mentioned about blackouts, and for me, I think...
yes, actually, I was pulling up this editorial cartoon from the Star. Can we put it up on the screen? And we have Kipchumba Murkomen and KA officials' knee-jerk reaction is the question they are asking here. You can go ahead now.
Yeah, so on the blackout, I think it's something that we really need to address. I know this is not the first time we're having what you call a national blackout. I don't know what is national about having a blackout, but I think... Across
the country at the same time.
You know, we really want to look at the term national as something positive, something to look forward to. Literally, as a nation, we were not looking forward to this. But number one, at the Minister for Transport, C.S. Murkomen, I think for me, really has raised a little bit of the bar that the people who manage critical infrastructure in this country, if you are holding a critical job, some of these jobs have got what you would call a zero-fail policy. As in, if, for example, the people who guard the president will take a wink and something happens to him, and we will not have a country. The JKIA's image is actually very, very battered. Already, it's been battered when we talk about losing luggage. Today, if you speak for those of us who work in the region, you will be told if you wanted to transport a precious stone, you cannot bring it through JKIA because it will get lost. And then over and above that, we are trying to repair that particular image. And then we have got people who have normalized incompetence and doing bad things, and they get away. As a nation, I think that we really need to get over that. So how he did it, I also hope that it's quite in compliance with the law, as it were. So what I would really want is that from the one government approach is that we see the same from the CES for energy, because we cannot have the people at KAA, for example, getting a fair beating, but that is a deserved beating, and then somehow people in the Ministry of Energy, that is for the guys at the Kenya Airports Authority, it's about preparedness. It was not about... You know, like, for example, they bought generators 2 years ago, and those generators have not been commissioned. So why did we procure them in the first place? So for that, I think that is good. What I expect is that now that Parliament has actually brought in, or rather has asked the CS for energy to show up, and that we will see the same energy that was used against Babu over flimsy stuff also applying here, because we do not want to have people with big budgets but zero responsibility. You know, the bigger the budget, to whom so much is given, like the CS transport, so much is also expected. So we cannot be giving you jobs and then you sleep on them and you come and gale us with English and a lot of stuff. So for this one, let us not normalize this way of doing things. That somehow, Olive, you screw up the show here and then you go to the management and tell them, okay, good people, this and that. No. We give you serious work, you must do it well.
All right.
Then finally, kindly, we were talking about the dialogue bit of it, of where we are going. First of all, we have gone back to what I think the government asked for. Can we institutionalize this particular dialogue? Anything outside of the law should not be. So when the Senate and the National Assembly is actually calling guys to then formalize this process, we are institutionalizing this particular dialogue. It takes its rightful place because the home of dialogue as a nation is the legislature, because the legislature is a deliberative assembly. The Constitution so well knew that we are a people who love to talk to each other, and therefore ensure that there's dialogue at different level. Within the policy cycle, at the executive level, the budget cycle, and then properly where we do a lot of our talking should be through the legislature, whether it is at the national level, in the two houses of the national level, or in counties. So we are institutionalizing that. When they do that, it will still be subject to the house that is supposed to take care of that. Anything outside of that, like what we were being asked, having the Kofi Annan style and stuff, things that are outside or on the border of the law, we are doing away with that. So institutionalize it, have it exactly now. The dialogue is exactly where government said it should be.
All right. Okay. I want Ishmael to weigh in before we quickly take a break.
I think the dialogue team should caution itself and look at the risk of what the High Court already found, that State House and government cannot initiate certain proposals which are far-reaching. And I think once they question themselves on that, it's cool. Let the people talk. I've always been supporting the fact that let the people talk. Whether it is perceived that the decisions have already been made, let them talk. Now, lastly, Olive, you know, you've asked a question in terms of this other question of how the opposition and the government should look at each other when they are going to dialogue. It's very important that people, you know, respect each other. And it is not only the opposition that has been bad-mouthing the intentions of the dialogue. You've seen Deputy President has already made a lot of, you know, strong remarks. Raila Odinga has made a lot of strong remarks. I think they should all tone down. But when you talk about this blackout, Olive, you know, it is not proper governance for a minister to come out and simply fire people just in the evening.
He said it was by mutual consent.
I think, I mean, you are a big brother and you are telling us that we all know that there was no consent for them to leave office. In Kenya, you don't resign, you have to be pushed. But my point is this: if the KAA officials have to be fired just by a meeting like that, then the Minister for Transport should as well resign. I will tell you why. In 2015 Mwongozo document that really proposes you know, various ways of governance within parastatals and within government, it is not new that Kipchumba Murkomen did not know that the generators at the airport were dysfunctional. So just coming up and saying no, and then again, it's not about those managers. There's a board, there's a whole board at the KAA. Did it know that there was no generator? If yes, the board must update and appraise the minister every other 3 months. There is a you know, board updates. So if all these things were happening for the last 1 year, and then he just comes up and fires people in the evening, I think that is kind of trying to cover up something. Governance demands that you do appraisals every other week, every other month, every other quarter. So was that done so that you come and say, oh, there was no generator? Unless you prove that all these reports were done and then the managers refused to buy the generators.
All right, although we need to take a break.
Before I forget, he's mentioned something that is important.
Okay.
Now that he's speaking about Mwongozo,
Guys, Sinichukwe, please, so that I don't cut you short and you don't have to rush.
Okay.
Let us take a break. We continue. We continue with this conversation on the other side. I also have a few points I want to follow up on the other side of this break.
when you're finally released from pain. That moment when you start to get back to ordinary, and ordinary feels amazing. Whatever pain you're going through, release starts here.
With Glovo unaweza order chochote na ukipata una celebrate na body yako yote. Because your tasty grilled chicken ikifika, weekend inaanza. Ingredients are your favorite recipe just in time. Na wakati keki inafika ndio sherehe inaanza. Because to get anything on Glovo deserves a dance. Download the app, order anything unataka na we track minute by minute mpaka ikufikie. Glovo, order anything, we deliver in minutes.
For all your sporty news updates,
this is the first time I'm actually holding a sword.
It's fun conversations.
Tell me something, why jersey 14?
There was Thierry Henry, you know, this jersey 14 where my mom bought me his jersey.
Great entertainment. Rip-cracking laughter.
Yeah, that's our director.
And insightful banter.
Tell us about that rivalry with the Kani Simbine. When you get to track, there's no friendship. Eliud, what's your favorite food?
Favorite food is
yes.
Join us every Monday at 10 p.m. with NTV Sports gurus Bernard Ndong and James Wakabi. Sport on NTV, your home of sports.
Spot On in association with DSTV.
Dial *423# or download my DSTV app to get a DSTV HD decoder with 1 month of family for just 2,999 Kenya shillings. It's the Premier League on DSTV.
Own your dream home for as low as 1.98 million Kenya shillings in Vipingo Kilifi. SMS Vipingo to 22365 or call us today on 0740 400 215. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. Tulikuwa tunaongea mambo ya the action taken by Kipchumba Murkomen on KA officials following the national outage. Although Ishmael Brian Obuya told us on Saturday this was not the first time uko stima zilipotea bila generator ku kick in. This is the editorial cartoon on the Standard this morning. 6 months ago, they say the president said, "Let there be light," and Energy CS Davis Chirchir and CEO Kenya Power Joseph Siror, Transport CS Kipchumba Murkomen in the dark thereafter. Arnold, you had an intervention?
I had just a contribution into that. Number one, first of all, I actually want to sympathize with Kenya Power. Because what so many people do not know that Kenya Power is just a vendor. In Nairobi, of course, they own a few lines. But the national infrastructure that transmits electricity is owned by Ketraco. Somehow, every time there is a failure in power transmission, of course, the only interface we know in that particular complex matrix that is the energy sector is Kenya Power. But Kenya Power is a vendor. I think it's only in Nairobi where they own a little bit of infrastructure, not in the entirety. But the bigger thing is Ketraco.
Briefly,
now,
because this is away from...
I just wanted to take him back from where we are. Initially, in the statement given by the CS, they talk about Lake Turkana wind power having switched off, and then at that particular time, they were contributing 4%. Lake Turkana wind power does a statement that actually effectively contradicts the minister.
I was actually pulling them up.
They say that they had an overload in the grid. At the time when they switched off, because they were struggling to actually do generation, they were doing 14%, and they ask a question that we have always skirted around. That normally when one plant or generator goes down, the others are supposed to step in. if you look at how we pay IPPs and the people who generate power, is that for IPPs, they are paid for being ready. There is that thing that we pay them for readiness. So what Lake Turkana guys are actually asking is actually a very important question. Is that since we are all paid for readiness, why weren't other people there ready to actually step in? That question, we really don't want to deal with it. So Ishmael spoke about Mwongozo. In Mwongozo, I think one of those things that this particular administration should do is to go back to one of the proposals that Mwongozo did. Mwongozo said that we move away from the State Corporations Act and do what we did then called the GOE Bill, the Government-Owned Enterprises Bill, to replace the State Corporations Act. Because this is where you find weak boards, a very strong management where the CEO can actually play around with the board. And then now we are left with situations where you have got board people with very big names but very little impact. So you find a board member who cannot, for example, unless you have got the backup of a CS or the government at the top, sometimes you realize that board members are not able to effect some of these things. So be that as it may, we also need restructuring of how we manage parastatals and government-owned entities and businesses.
All right, Kennedy, very briefly,
I also wanted to weigh in on something there. First, the best decision made by the CS in this country was this. We have to understand that there is a challenge in the near past between the government and the IPP, the independent power producers. There is a current debate as to whether they should be maintained or they should be removed. Because depending on the amount which is paid to them versus what is paid to KenGen, which is the biggest, which is the government power producer, is very high. They produce very little and then they are paid very high, yet KenGen produces very much and then is paid very less. So there's a debate whether they should be removed or maintained. I don't know whether this was a punishment from them so that they were not willing to be ready when there is any such challenge coming from the other side. So the minister in his action, and I want to thank Murkomen because he's very clear that if this is a zone of government which requires power to be very steady every time, like at JKIA, KAA should have ensured that in as much, because they know they require power and there's a challenge between IPP and the government. So they should have ensured that their generator, because when we were coming, when you have a problem, you must be preparing for it. If they failed to prepare up to the extent that this really happened at JKIA, KAA boss had to take responsibility, and we cannot blame the minister for acting. So and I would tell Gor Selina, who is now going to take care of JKIA for now, and also Henry Ogoe, to ensure that they keep what is necessary, because there's a big problem, big squabble between power producers, independent power producers and the government. They want more that the government is not willing to give. And you know people who are behind these independent power producers. Then that's why I'm thinking it could even be a sabotage from these people who are shouting outside the government. But what I am telling you is this. Ministry of Energy is supposed also to check as to what happened to that, but there is supposed to be a renegotiated deal between the independent power producers and the government, so that we see they are paid, so that they are paid a meaningful amount, so that they be ready, not that they want exorbitant prices to make some people happy.
All right, and because I am inviting the communication strategists to weigh in, allow me one thing. This is a statement that was released by Kenya Power last night at 9:45, the country experienced a nationwide power outage after losing 270 megawatts generation from Lake Turkana Wind Power Plant. Lake Turkana Wind Power Plant came and said, "No, me girl." They came with their statement and they said, "Our attention has been drawn to various social media reports and a statement by Kenya Power in respect of the present outage." And they continued to say that they wish to assert that it has not caused the current power outage. LTWP, the Lake Turkana Wind Power, was forced to go offline and stop generation following an over-voltage situation in the national grid system, which, to avoid extreme damage, causes the wind power plant to automatically switch off. The conclusion, they say, that the grid system over-voltage caused this issue is supported by preliminary reports and analysis undertaken by the relevant independent industry stakeholders. They're basically saying, you will not put this doo-doo on our doorstep. Yeah. Mark.
Yeah. First and foremost, before you give a statement, this is advice to everyone involved, including some of them who are my friends. So first, before you come out with a statement, put all your ducks in a row. Have one story for all of you. Okay, that's very critical, because in this day and age, you're not going to gag anyone from defending themselves. And let's remember, the Lake Turkana power producer is not exactly a government institution. So they have a reputation to protect, and they are also part of the independent power producers that people have been complaining about. So they have a reason to protect themselves. But at the core of this issue are two issues. Number one, do Kenyans suffer issues of overvoltage in this country? Yes, they do. If you ask anyone whether they've had a fridge or a TV blow out on them because of the voltage regulation from Kenya Power, yes, there's a problem. The other problem is this, is that and no one is talking about this, it took them 15 hours to do a black start. Okay, that's what it's called, because it requires power to restart our production unit. 15 hours. Now, if that's not incompetence, I do not know what is. Because the little engineering I studied before I left taught me that when you build a national power grid, forget about the redundancies at JKIA, Kenya Power, KenGen, and Ketraco have a responsibility to make sure that their black start ability is up to scratch. When it takes 15 hours as though you are doing surgery to separate Siamese twins, when all you're doing is switching on generators, it is a shame. And therefore, Kenya Power should also take responsibility and say, you know what, we were a bit of dunderheads. We do not know how to match the frequencies and the voltages of our various black start sites. And therefore, it took us 15 hours, what a second-year engineering student should be able to do in 15 minutes.
All right. I really want, Arnold, 30 seconds on this.
Very fast. I think I want to actually agree with Mark on this. That
really? Including the danda?
Not really on the danda head bit of it. Mark has got a unique way of choosing words, and that is just Mark for you.
He's like simple communication.
It is himself. So, this is it. First of all, I'm not an engineer, but I do not want to buy the kind of explanation that is there. First of all of us, for example, were on our phones. So we were even chatting, right? Does Safaricom use electricity? Yes. Is it run on power? Yes. Is there any single person who said that I have no network because Safaricom, because there's a national power blackout? No. So if Safaricom, a private entity, could ensure that they are providing a critical service and none, they know they have got a fail-safe, what Mark calls a redundancy, they have got a fail-safe mechanism in place to ensure that the network remains afloat. No one at Kenya Airports Authority can give us an excuse that they wouldn't know. Safaricom, for example, they kept us all connected, including going back on social media for a few of us who have got these funny phones like those ones, and we had 112 charge.
Let me tell you, I was at 5%, so I wouldn't know about network.
So I'm just saying, so no one went off. That's why you've not reported. You will have reported that by now. So there is no excuse at the Airports Authority that they did not have a fail-safe mechanism, that they didn't have redundancies in place. Secondly, that network from the generators to the guys who do transmission to Kenya Power that only does vending, unfortunately, because the biggest thing Kenya Power owns are meters. The meters that you have. That is actually their key thing. For them, they are vendors. Everything else is Ketraco. Other things are done. So it took longer, Mark, apparently, because we had to use the Seven Fork Dam. And you know that is hydro. So it takes time to actually catch up. I spoke to an engineer friend of mine, and he was telling me, you know, that generators take time before they stabilize. And I told him, this is 2023. I do not believe that when you are building a national grid, that this is how it happens, and that if it goes down, that we will stay there because generators take time. And I told him, in IPPs, we have, no, 15. Let us just say 15. There are people who actually had almost 24 hours of not seeing power. So that we cannot be here. And they were talking about the Ugandan source was not available at that particular time. So who manages these things? Who sits on the chessboard and manages these things? Why I say that is that, do you know what it gives somebody out there an idea? That if you are to knock out power just one way as a country, then you have left us in darkness for 24 hours and you can do whatever you want. There is everything to explain for the guys in the ministry, whoever they are, from IPPs, KenGen to Ketraco to Kenya Power. We really need for them to actually just come out and speak to us in a language we understand, and not throw around jargon and technical words in the name of you know this, you know that. No, I have given you an example. All of us who are connected by Airtel and Safaricom, and at no point did that service go down.
All right, thank you. See, okay, so have we decided, have we said now this should be part of the talks? Or?
No, you see, the issue here, Olive, you know the problem.
I want to move us, eh?
Was Nation off during that time?
On.
If Nation was not off during blackout, why was JKIA off?
All right.
Murkomen is right to have acted the way
you realize, here's the issue, here's the issue. We've had national blackouts before. We were off for an hour. Whoever was in charge then was able to do a black start within an hour or two. The fact is that there is gross incompetence in the management of this whole issue. And if we are sitting here and agreeing that Murkomen is right, then we must also agree that Chirchir is wrong, that Kenya Power and Ketraco and the rest have not faced the consequences of this. Because what is good for the goose is good for the gander.
Olive, my issue. Wait, just give me a minute. Olive, just give me a minute. Olive,
yes,
Mark, just a minute.
Yes,
I think the main issue, we've left out a very important issue throughout all these discussions. What does this mean about our bills? This type of management, what does it speak about the kind of bills we get in our homes? I mean, does it show that bills are very well managed, but blackouts are a normal or an abnormal thing? Our bills are also being mismanaged now, evidently because of this type of mismanagement. I mean, we are getting bills in terms of a small household is getting a bills of 5,000-10,000 in a month. So I believe that the confusion and struggle between the independent power producers and the government must be resolved. Otherwise, we are really making Kenyans poor from this kind of bills.
Absolute last, Kennedy.
Yes, I also wanted to tell Bichache that while we want to talk about the Ministry for Energy, maybe Chirchir is yet to find out what the problem was. So he cannot act, wait, he cannot act just because Murkomen has acted. Murkomen has acted because JKIA is a point where you cannot assume anything. And like you said, Nation Center was not off. How can JKIA be off? KAA should have been very clear on that. So Chirchir is yet to know whether the independent producers are the ones who have interfered or whether there was a certain technical problem, because that is technical. But this one is managerial. Technical and managerial, you can only act by dealing with what Murkomen did, and then Chirchir must wait now for technical advice on what happened.
Let me correct my good friend here. The JKIA cannot be more important than the rest of Kenya. So you cannot say JKIA is important and the rest of Kenya was in blackouts. There are people who died in ICUs. So let's not trivialize the issue.
Report yet.
Reportedly, NICUs.
We are yet to get that
reportedly,
yes.
So not yet verified.
The point is, there are people who lost lives, lost income, and this country was in a blackout. Number two, the issue, even from Kenya Power's own statement, is the issue that their black start process took too long. He may not be aware what a black start is, but those who are aware would automatically know, as the CS should know, that it is obvious. But also, let us remember one government approach. Murkomen went to Expressway. In 15 minutes, knew that it was 600 million shillings worth of damage. Why is Chirchir the slowest one?
Anyway,
Arnold,
again, I want to support Nyaribo when he says that this particular fiasco should then force us to ask these questions. Are our bills really our bills? And I want to talk about the mathematics, not the mathematics that we saw there. In the minister's, in the CS statement, he speaks about 4% of what Lake Turkana Wind Power was putting in at that particular point. Lake Turkana Wind Power on the other side says, because I know they must have a system in which you know how much you're putting in. They say that they were putting into the grid about 14%. So whose mathematics is right? And because these numbers actually translate to money and they end up on our bills, who was saying the truth? Look at Lake Turkana Wind Power speaking about, at the time when they actually went off, they were doing 200, I think, and 70 megawatts, and that translated to about 14 point, I don't know how much that is, 14 plus %. So if we were doing reimbursement and paying somebody for what they actually are paying, who is saying the truth, and how do we normally come to a consensus and know if the producer is saying they were putting in 14% at the time they went off?
All right.
And the government on the other side is actually saying that they were putting in 4%. So that mathematics for me, apo iko kachida kidogo apo. We really need to actually understand what happens there and how that then ends up and translates onto a bill. All
right, so that's the mess we are looking at. At the time, so this is from that statement, you're saying 14 point something, they say 14.6%. At the time, LTWP, like Turkana Wind Power, was forced to switch off. It was producing 270 megawatts out of a national total of 1,855 megawatts, which is 14.6%. Okay, so I feel like we are a pride of lions. National dialogue is a wildebeest, and we have been biting chunks out of this animal from different angles. But to bring us back to the topic at hand, which is the national dialogue committee, and also the statements, political statements that have been made around the issue. A couple of things. I know, Mark, you take the position that this thing is already decided and we are being treated to theatrics. But just listening to them, it's like hata hawajakubaliana agenda, because Raila Odinga in Kitengela anasema cost of living bado iko kwa meza, and audit of servers. Kenya Kwanza comes in and says mambo ya election tumeacha nyuma.
Well, let's understand each other that the political points they need to score and what the dialogue needs to achieve are not the same thing. When Azimio speaks, if it does not address issues of cost of living, then the people who went to the streets will say that this dialogue is just about the leaders, it is about jobs for the boys, and therefore it is not good for us. So Azimio, when it comes out, must talk about the cost of living. That is just good politics. At the same time, Azimio must consistently remind its followers that it lost the election unfairly, even though the Supreme Court disagrees with them, and frankly, so does logic. But logic be damned, Azimio, for as long as it exists, will continue to say that the elections 2022 were rigged. That's the politics. On this other side, the politics of the cost of living is a hot potato. They will agree that Uhuru Kenyatta in his leadership totally messed up the economy. But they will not agree that they have done anything wrong. To them, the increase in fuel by another 8% was also another thing to blame Uhuru Kenyatta on. So for their political talking points, the cost of living is a hot potato. They cannot touch it. But at the same time, Kenya Kwanza has waxed lyrical for times above number that they are not going to have a handshake. They will never agree with Raila Odinga. That guy, mtu akitendawili, whatever. So politically speaking, those are issues that these sides cannot drop and want to continue pushing. But in the background, if these people were so unhappy with each other, how is it then that they are still able to sit in those meetings? Why don't we hear that Kimani Ichung'wah punched Kalonzo Musyoka for being what Azimio is? The truth is we are being treated to politics. And the reason for that is they are trying to manage the population. And it is very good communication, by the way, because then by the time the deal is being done, it looks like it was a compromise and not a coming together, because these guys are avoiding a situation that we had with Uhuru Kenyatta where they shook hands, because Raila does not want Azimio's UDA's baggage, and UDA succeeds best. Listen, William Ruto has won 3 elections bashing Raila Odinga. In fact, let me tell you, the best favor Raila Odinga can do William Ruto is to remain politically active until 2027. Because Ruto is an expert at beating him in elections. So you don't want, listen, if you are a boxer and you're used to beating your opponent, why would you change the opponent? For why? Beat him all the time. So it is good. Listen, if there was no Uhuru Kenyatta or Raila Odinga, what will William Ruto campaign on?
All right, Kennedy, I was listening to the Deputy President's remarks in Mwala penye naambiwa alikasirisha Wakamba sana. Juu alisema finally they can get some dignity or something. And then I listened to him telling off Raila Odinga at a burial in Nakuru, the Mau Mau freedom fighter. And he really went in on Raila Odinga and said, "Hii handshake ndo imefanya hata hii barabara yenu iachwe kutengenezwa." And then I listened to him again, is it yesterday or is it over the weekend essentially, telling the president, you know, if you shake this man's hand utabadilika vile Uhuru alibadilika. Is this a man who is running scared?
I think Rigiji is only being truthful. And I think it's good to earn that title, truthful man. He only speaks the truth as it is supposed to be spoken without caring, without sugarcoating. In fact, if he was a fearful person, he would have sugarcoated words in Raila's presence. In fact, he would have told him, "You're my brother, we need to think how to work together." But then he told him nothing like anything you have been doing, because you have been doing a wrong thing. So he told him, but before I wade into that, I wanted to talk about police uniforms, the debate on police uniforms.
Please, no, because you'll be moving us back.
Okay, fine.
And only have a few minutes.
The national dialogue, as we were looking at it, is this a national dialogue or a mere conversation between two competitors? In my view, as any other governance expert would say, what is going on at Bomas basically is a conversation between the side that won and the side that lost. I was talking to one of the members of the technical team when I knew we were coming to discuss this. You know, I had to be privy to certain parts. And I talked to one of them, and he was very candid, Professor Dan Kanojuang. He said, at Bomas, we are looking at several issues that are going to affect the state of the nation. And the state of the nation is currently affected by two challenges. Number one, cost of living. They have to give it a serious focus. In fact, he's representing the government side. And actually, the government's focus is to reduce the cost of living by any means. And in fact, what they were expecting on that table is that Azimio would bring in a formula which they want to use, because actually they lost election. Now they don't have authority to control or to do it. So they can give the person who got that authority to do it how to do it, maybe borrow them a leave. So they are waiting for that proposal from the Azimio side once they approve that as one of the agenda. Number two, the second important thing is reconstitution of IEBC. And he was very categorical that there are so many by-elections which are due, but they cannot be conducted because we don't have a properly constituted IEBC. That one is putting us back. So the national dialogue team is actually supposed to ensure that these facts are put properly and clearly. But the most important thing, why this talk might end up nowhere, is because when Raila goes to public, he doesn't tell Kenyans what they discussed with the president in Mombasa. And Rigiji has told us they discussed something in Mombasa. If they didn't meet in Mombasa, then Raila should have come out and told us, "What, Rigiji is lying, we didn't meet in Mombasa." But if they met, then he also should tell Kenyans what they discussed with the president in Mombasa, so that Kenyans know whether that discussion was in respect of what they really went on the streets to look for.
All right, Arnold?
Somewhere in the Bible, there is this question: how can two walk together unless they agree?
All right, and as you answer that, sorry, I had a follow-up here.
Yes.
There's PLO Lumumba, Isaac Kalua, who are saying that perhaps we should relook at the Constitution. We are at a point where we can re-examine the Constitution and consider making amendments that would require a referendum. There are those who take the view that this process is BBI clothed differently, but essentially they're trying to avoid a referendum in determining some of these issues. Your thoughts?
I think, so as I was saying, somewhere in the Bible, there's this question posed: how can two walk together unless they agree? If the national dialogue that currently Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate are actually trying to institutionalize end up working, it means that they have agreed. There's no problem to people agreeing. But we need to actually call this for what it is. This fiasco that is the national dialogue is speaks to very many things. And I want to start at a very unlikely places. The ODM leader the other day bashed the American ambassador and said she should shut up and everything else. But then you really need to ask these questions. Number one, that particular individual who was being told to actually shut up is one person who was actually at the lead of eBay, a premier technology company. And at some point she actually was at HP, at the apex of HP. So when you talk about technology, that is one person who really understands what technology is. But you see, with Azimio's Majitu story, people around the 2000 hackers in Masai Mara, around somehow people hacking the system and then changing the forms, and somehow those people can actually hack everybody's phone that took those particular forms in voting stations and also change, as in we have got technology that is not available elsewhere, that people can actually hack a physical form I'm carrying on the road to look like the one that is in the system. You know, that kind of Majitu story. So for somebody who understands technology properly, like the American ambassador, she's been there, done that, at the apex of some of the leading technology ICT institutions. And then here, she's being told to shut up by somebody who actually believes in people who do ICT, run ICT like witchcraft. Talking about 2,000 hackers in Masai Mara and such stuff, you really then get back to one conclusion. That for Raila Odinga, electoral injustice, the cliche electoral injustice, is the goose that lays golden eggs for Raila Odinga. And it must be kept alive by all means. That is why you keep on talking about auditing the last election, because without that, there is no heartbeat of what they are trying to push in this particular conversation. Because you realize every time we go around, we end up here. So if these two end up agreeing, they'll be agreeing on one thing. The president has got his memorandum to parliament. He has got issues around two-thirds issue Article 27.8, but I would always ask young people, people with disability, the marginalized and the minorities, that there is something called Article 100. It is impossible for us to deal with Article 27.8 without addressing Article 100. Those two also need to be taken care of. We did not put them in the Constitution as decorations. Okay. We cannot deal with that separately. All so right. It is at this point, it is at this point that I actually agree with the Deputy President that this particular dialogue is not going anywhere.
All right.
And it should not amount to anything, because these two people do not agree unless they agree on something like, Mark keeps on saying that there has been an agreement somewhere and there is an outcome that what we are seeing are politics. If we were to go by Mark's word, then we will know that they understand each other. But I think the Deputy President is right when he says this particular thing should not, it's an amorphous thing that we do not know what it is. Okay. BBI already told us that anything they are trying to do here without going to the people, if they are going to be the originators of these things and they think that somehow this parliamentary animal can actually afford them to make these changes here, it's not possible. It's true. At 13 years, this constitution is due for an audit. We do a constitutional audit and make a structural adjustment to it, not to please a few individuals here and there. Okay. So if we are going in for the leader of majority and changing the national organogram, let me call it the national government, as in the national governance organogram, it has to be wholesome, bottom up.
Okay. Ishmael, last word.
I just believe that, I hope that the former Prime Minister might change his mind and front someone else even to sit in the office of the leader of opposition, so that he prepares him for 2027. I just hope. I just hope. Not that the Prime Minister, his political energy is down in any way, but at least to change the game so that we are able to see a different goalkeeper. But having said that,
it sounds like on this one all of you agree.
Yeah, but having said that, I think students of mediation need to really be very concerned with this process. There has been too much talk about they have agreed, but that is how mediation is. It has to be like that. You agree to walk out of your big seat and come to a table where we can now start to discuss. And then technical teams were created now to draft the agenda. It is true that the outcome of all these, the main issue, main objective has been agreed on. There should be no protests that bring violence. That I think they have agreed. They've also agreed that can you halt everything until we talk, and they have agreed. So, but in terms of the technical nitty-gritty, that is what these technical teams are now worried about. They are creating the agenda, and it will be signed tomorrow. I think if you have an opportunity for us after tomorrow, we should then be able to dissect whether it is true these items are what the Wananchi want, or they have created their own animal. But in terms of that big office, I'm still hoping and praying that, yes, somebody else should be put in that seat so that Raila Odinga can actually be the great statesman who can support someone else, yes.
All right, so I will have to end the conversation there, but yeah, let me thank my panelists who've been with me in studio this morning. Okay, I appear to have lost the poster there, but it's fine, I do them. Ishmael Nyaribo, advocate, political analyst, Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. We've had in studio Kennedy Ondiek, who is a governance and political analyst, and we've also had in studio a communication strategist, Mark Bichachi. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope you will honor my invite once they have signed something to dissect that. But let me just say, as Olive Burrows, this is how I'm going into my week. This is the mood. Mora and Faith Kipyegon, our girls, our national athletics team. Good morning.